They brought him in wearing shackles far heavier than necessary. Not because he was dangerous, but because he wasn't afraid. Ryan Keel, human, mid-30s, grease beneath his nails, an old engine spark tattoo on his forearm, and a posture that said he'd rather be anywhere else but standing in the throne room of the Zarvathi Empire. Even now, on a floor of polished obsidian beneath a ceiling carved with the screams of subjugated worlds, he didn't bow. The guards didn't like that. But Queen Sarava, Empress of the Nine Clusters, Devourer of Rebellion, Scourge of Hollow Stars, smiled. "Such defiance," she purred, her voice the sound of metal on silk. "And yet you volunteered to fix what no one else could." "I volunteered to survive," Ryan replied, his voice low, raw from travel. "You dragged me out of a junk ship and offered me a job. I'm not here for the politics, Your Majesty. I'm here because I don't like leaving things broken." Serviva's smile sharpened. "Well, see if that includes your spine." With a flick of her finger, the chamber split open behind her, parting like the jaws of some ancient predator. Gas hissed from vents. The guards took a step back. What emerged wasn't a ship. It was Drexar. A living beast 12 FT tall at the shoulder, its scales blackened by centuries of scorched star metal, wings folded like sheared blades, claws curved like starship hull hooks. Its eyes burned with a glow that whispered war, memory, and ruin. This was the Empire's terror beast, her apex deterrent. Its roar had broken alliances. Its name silenced uprisings. Drexar stood still as stone, eyes focused on nothing until Sarava spoke. "Kill the human." Silence gripped the chamber. Drexar's head turned. The guards leaned forward, and then nothing happened. Drexar didn't move. It sniffed once, then tilted its head and took a slow step toward Ryan. The guards raised their blasters. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Easy," he muttered, his tone less command and more instinct. He lifted his bound hands slightly, palms open, calm. "I don't want to hurt you." Drexar took another step forward. The guards began shouting warnings, but Queen Sarava held up her hand, watching, studying. Ryan remained still as Drexar approached. The dragon's breath was hot and sharp, scented with smoke and old blood. It lowered its massive head until its glowing eyes were inches from Ryan's, and then it chuffed. A short, deep exhale like curiosity. Sarava rose from her throne, voice cold with growing disbelief. "Why isn't it attacking?" Ryan glanced up at the beast, saw the old plasma restraints buried beneath its scales, the crusted wiring, the neural implant blinking a faint red just behind the left ear. "You've been hurt," he whispered to Drexar, not to soothe but to recognize. "Every time you disobeyed, they shocked you. No one ever told you it was okay to stop." He stepped forward and Drexar let him. A single stunned gasp filled the room. One of the guards stumbled backward. Serviva's knuckles clenched around the rail of her throne. "That's impossible." But it wasn't, because Drexar, the Empire's killer dragon, bowed its head before the human with a wrench tattooed on his arm and obeyed. She dismissed the court with venom in her voice. The massive doors slammed shut behind her, leaving only Queen Sarava, her beast, and the mechanic who had somehow shattered centuries of imperial control with a whisper. "You used a code, didn't you?" she said, packing. "Some hidden phrase buried in its architecture. There's no other way. He only responds to voice print encryption." "I didn't say anything special," Ryan replied, kneeling beside Drexar's foreleg. He had already pulled a scanning wand from the inside of his coat and was quietly assessing the corrosion patterns around the neural harness. "He responded because I didn't try to own him." Sarava descended the steps of her throne with slow, deliberate grace. Her armored train shimmered like blood and firelight. "He is not a him. Drexar is a weapon, a tool forged to annihilate." "And even tools break under cruelty," Ryan said, not looking up. "This isn't a machine. This is a creature you've rewired like scrap." He tapped a cluster of burnt relays behind Drexar's ear. "These are ancient, haven't been serviced in decades. He's in pain constantly. You should be shocked he hasn't turned on you." "I should have you executed," she snapped. Ryan finally stood. "I'd say I'm used to that threat by now." The dragon stirred slightly, a low rumble in its throat. Not hostile, protective. Sarava blinked, and for a moment something slipped in her expression. Confusion, vulnerability, but it was gone in an instant. "You will continue to work on him. Under guard, you will not speak of this, not to anyone. Do you understand me, mechanic?" Ryan met her gaze. "Only if you let me do it properly. No cages, no threats, just time, tools, and a little dignity." Sarava hesitated, and then with the wave of a single clawed hand, she dismissed the guards that had reassembled at the edge of the room. "You have 3 days," she said, her voice like a knife dragged across crystal. If he doesn't obey me by the end of it. Ryan shrugged. You can throw me to your next monster. She turned without a word and vanished into the shadows behind her throne. And Drexar, he lay down beside Ryan, not like a beast at rest, but like a sentinel watching, waiting. Ryan exhaled and began his work not on the implant, but on the creature beneath it. Because what the Empire didn't understand was simple. Dragons didn't need to be controlled. They just needed to be heard. They gave him a workshop 3 levels beneath the throne chamber. A cold, steel-lined repair bay meant for old royal starfighters. It still smelled of scorched plasma and rusted failure. They didn't clear out the corpses of crushed servitors in the corners, nor the bone-deep dust left by the last mechanic who dared to work here and spoke too loudly. But Ryan Keel didn't complain. He just requested a proper tool set, 3 fusion welders, a diagnostic core link, and most absurdly, a hammock. The guards scoffed. The Queen approved all of it. By dusk cycle, Drexar was escorted in under a dozen rifle muzzles. He didn't growl. He didn't snap. He just walked through the gauntlet of fear like a monarch returning to his ruin. Ryan barely glanced up from his workbench. "You're late," he said dryly, flicking on a torch. Drexar huffed smoke across the floor, laid down with a groan of tired metal on bone, and folded his wings tight. For the first time in decades, he was unchained. Ryan slid his stool closer and began gently peeling back the outer panel of the dragon's neural armor with the care of someone defusing an ancient warhead. It wasn't easy. The plates were fused to flesh. The Empire had welded obedience into Drexar's skin. "I get it now," Ryan murmured as he worked. "They didn't just hurt you, they made sure you'd never forget who did it." The dragon rumbled, not a growl, a yes. Ryan paused, then continued. "They wanted a monster. What they got was something smarter than their throne, and now they don't know what to do with you." Above, in her private chamber of polished void glass and twilight silk, Queen Sarava watched the surveillance feed in absolute silence. She didn't understand it. No override codes, no chemical sedatives, just hands and words. Words the dragon listened to. The Empire's greatest weapon, her terror forged in chaos, lay still while a scruffy human with a crooked smile whispered kindness over circuit rot. Sarava clenched the arms of her throne. Drexar was hers, and yet she could not stop watching. It happened on the second morning, just before the solar flare ceremony. Ryan had just finished recalibrating the impulse inhibitors on Drexar's dorsal matrix. The dragon, breathing slowly, was nearly asleep. A warmth had grown between them, not of ownership, not even command, but of trust, raw and difficult. Then came the interruption. An alarm blared across the chamber. The main bay doors slammed open. Royal guards stormed in with rifles drawn. "On your feet, mechanic," barked a voice, Captain Vorax, commander of the Queen's elite Praetorians. "You've been summoned now." Ryan stood slowly, wiping his hands on his grimy shirt. Drexar growled but didn't move. "Is there a reason you're pointing guns at a guy who hasn't even had breakfast yet?" Ryan asked. Vorax narrowed his eyes. "Silence. Her Majesty demands your presence now. Bring the beast." Ryan tilted his head. "And if I say no?" Vorax raised his rifle. Drexar stood, not slowly, suddenly, and the temperature in the room changed. The dragon's wings unfurled slightly, his tail curling protectively around Ryan. The air tasted of ozone and threat. 10 soldiers raised their weapons. "Stand down," Vorax barked. Ryan touched Drexar's shoulder lightly. "Easy." The dragon's body stopped coiling. The rifles didn't lower, but their owners flinched. Vorax swallowed. They escorted Ryan and Drexar to the Grand Hall, where Queen Sarava stood before her throne, wrapped in solar light armor, eyes sharp as daggers of light. "You've made quite the impression, human," she said, voice echoing through the crystal-lined chamber. "So much so that the outer ministers are asking questions, dangerous ones. Some whisper that Drexar has betrayed his leash." Ryan shrugged. "You wanted him fixed, I fixed him. Problem is you went too far." She hissed, "He's not supposed to bond. He was made to obey." She turned and lifted her hand sharply, triggering a command signal from her ring. Pain rippled through Drexar's spine. He let out a roar that shook the room. His wings flared, his claws screeched against the crystal. He buckled. "Stop it," Ryan shouted, running to him. Sarava narrowed her eyes. "If he listens to you, command him to submit." Ryan turned, furious. "You don't own him." "I made him," she shouted back. "His bones were forged in my vaults, his mind sculpted in labs that bled stars." You made a cage, Ryan snapped, kneeling beside Drexar. But he built something stronger with me. And then it happened. Sarava triggered another pulse. But this time, Drexar didn't fall. He growled, shook the pain off like water from his wings, and took one step forward toward her. She staggered back, stunned. The pulse ring activated again, flashing red. Drexar didn't stop. Drexar, Ryan whispered, standing beside him. Let it go. And the dragon did. He stopped, still calm, but his eyes were no longer glowing from implanted fire. They were glowing with choice. The chamber felt utterly silent. Serviva stared, and for the first time in her reign, she didn't speak. The dragon looked at Ryan and sat by his side, not hers. And somewhere in the highest ranks of the galactic aristocracy, watching through encrypted feeds, 100 cold minds realized something terrifying. The dragon had chosen the mechanic, not the crown. The halls of the Zarvathi imperial palace echoed like tombs after the incident in the Grand Hall. Queen Sarava had not spoken publicly for 3 days. Ministers whispered of weakness. Generals plotted behind closed doors. Propaganda streams paused, then glitched, and the galaxy watched with bated breath. Ryan Keel, oblivious to the storm he'd stirred, spent his days back in the dragon's chamber, tuning Drexar's wing socket actuators and soldering a mess of neural relay threads that hadn't seen real maintenance in over a century. Who wires a power inverter into a pain receiver? He muttered under his breath, gripping the casing with a viro clamp. No wonder your shoulder's been twitching. Drexar huffed lightly in reply, the sound more amused than irritated. From a distance, the royal scientists observed in utter disbelief. Drexar allowed Ryan to touch him without sedation. He rested his massive head near Ryan's toolkit. He even slept in full daylight, something none had ever witnessed. The dragon wasn't just obeying, he was relaxing. Meanwhile, in the war chamber 2 floors above, Sarava stared into a hollow map of rebellion reports. The peripheral sectors were growing unstable. News had spread beyond her control. Pirates that once trembled at her banners now painted wrenches beside their insignias in mockery. Resistance cells were broadcasting ancient footage of the moment Drexar sat beside a human and turned his back on the crown. Sarava's voice broke the silence like a blade. Find me every record on Ryan. I want to know who he is, what he was, and how he did what my entire species could not. Her advisors fidgeted. One, General Kavix, dared to speak. Majesty, perhaps we miscalculated. The dragon did not reject you. He simply responded to something outside protocol. We could isolate the mechanic, reassert command. You'll do nothing without my order, she snapped. And for the first time, doubt slid into her own voice. Because deep beneath all her fury, Serviva knew what she had witnessed wasn't programming, it was will, and that frightened her more than any weapon. That evening, Ryan was summoned again, not to the throne chamber, but to a black courtyard at the edge of the palace, a place where condemned traitors once vanished and never returned. He walked alone under 24 watchful eyes. Drexar followed, unshackled. The court awaited them, Sarava seated beneath a hovering obsidian arch, flanked by warlords, scientists, executioners, and her personal guard. This is where loyalty is tested, she said, her voice ringing out clear and cold. You've embarrassed me, mechanic. You've corrupted what I built, and now you will prove that your influence is real. She stood and extended one long, armored hand toward a massive containment door. Inside is a second dragon, Drexar's twin, unmodified, untouched by your whispers. If your bond is real, let him stop this beast. Ryan's heart sank. You're forcing him into a fight. I am reminding him who he is. The doors opened, and from the smoke stepped a creature twice as violent in design, scales sharper, eyes burning with fury. It had no name, no handler, only rage. It had been bred for one purpose, to kill everything it was pointed at. Drexar didn't move. Ryan stood between them, arms out, panicked. No, he doesn't have to fight, there's another way. But the beast lunged, and Drexar met it head-on. It wasn't a battle. It was a storm crashing into itself. Wings slammed into wings, claws tore through stone. The sky itself seemed to recoil as the 2 dragons collided in midair, their roars rolling across the palace like sonic war drums. Ryan ran for cover, blood pounding in his ears, screaming Drexar's name. No response. Above him, the dragons spiraled in a brutal dance of dominance. The twin fought like a living weapon, relentless, mechanical, merciless, but Drexar fought like something alive, not to destroy, but to protect. He turned each blow away from the palace, from Ryan, guiding the fury of the fight toward the canyon beyond. And finally, in a shattering explosion of dust and light, Drexar pinned the twin to the earth. He didn't kill him. He howled a long, echoing cry of something deeper than challenge, freedom, and the twins stopped. He blinked as if for the first time, confused, shaking, lost. In that moment, the second dragon did something no one expected. He submitted, folded his wings, and bowed. The courtyard fell silent. Ryan stood breathless, bleeding from a small cut on his temple, eyes wide. Sarava stood frozen, her hands still mid-command. The court said nothing because everything had changed. Two dragons, one bond, and neither answered to her. In the high citadel above the frozen spires of Zarvathi Prime, Queen Sarava sat unmoving. Her throne of jagged crystal seemed smaller now, dwarfed by the silence that had swallowed her court after the twin dragon bowed to Drexar. Not to her, not to her empire, but to him, to the one they called the human wrench-bearer. Sarava's eyes, once sharp enough to flay skin from lips, now reflected confusion buried beneath venom. Every breath she took was shallow, strained, as if her own lungs were questioning her reign. He should not be capable of choice, she whispered, more to herself than to the ministers at her side. They are made from war matrices, fused to command codes. How did this mechanic unravel the leash? None dared to answer. Ryan had returned to the forge chamber in silence. He hadn't celebrated. He hadn't claimed victory. He only knelt beside Drexar, who now bore deep gashes along his neck and wings and cleaned the blood from his scales. Wordlessly, he hummed as he worked, an old tune from Earth that no one here would recognize. The second dragon, unnamed and battered, lay not far, watching everything with eyes less feral now, less rigid. No one had ever called to him. No one had ever not commanded him. He kept glancing between Drexar and Ryan, twitching at the sound of calm voices and gentle hands. Ryan finally broke the silence. "You got a name?" The dragon blinked. "I didn't think so," Ryan muttered. "Let's fix that." He stared at the dragon for a long time, then smirked. "I'll call you Solar. You're not just a shadow. You've got light buried somewhere." Solar twitched, then dipped his massive head in recognition. Not obedience, recognition. Drexar growled softly, something like approval. From the upper chambers, spies sent reports to ministers, and from ministers to warlords, and from warlords to the outer fleets. The reports were all the same. Two dragons now followed the human, one loyal through earned trust, the other through awakening. The throne trembled not because it was struck, but because it had been outgrown. That night across the Zarvathi sector, rebellion did not come in fire. It came in the quiet. On deep space frigates, engineers replaced the imperial crest with a new symbol, an open wrench wrapped in coiled wings. On jungle moons where imperial dread treaders once thundered through trees, children painted dragons not with red eyes and fangs, but with quiet, watchful expressions and names. And in distant factories, workers played the clip again and again. A monstrous dragon built to crush, lowering its head beside a man who wiped oil from his brow and said nothing proud. Queen Sarva summoned Ryan in private. She wore a robe of shimmering dusk metal and stood beneath a ceiling of starlight that had once shone only for her. She did not glare. She did not smirk. "You've broken something," she said, staring at him. "I'm not sure it can be rebuilt." Ryan stood with arms crossed. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be rebuilt. Sareva stepped forward. "You don't understand the weight of what you've done. They worship you out there. The fleets hesitate. Even my generals speak your name behind closed doors." He shrugged. "I didn't ask them to." "No, but they chose to. That's worse." She paused, then walked slowly toward the viewing wall where both dragons, Drexar and Solar, rested on the edge of the outer platform, side by side. "They were never meant to be free," she murmured. "They were meant to scare the stars back into orbit. I shaped them from marrow and will, and you got them to lay down their fury for a song." Ryan didn't respond. She turned back to him, her voice soft and strange. "I could kill you right here." "You could have yesterday," he replied. "But you didn't," she stared, and for the first time her shoulders slumped an inch, no more, but it was enough. "Tell me why," she asked, barely audible. "Why do they obey you?" Ryan looked her in the eyes. "They don't, they trust me." Silence, then slowly the queen of the Zarvathi Empire turned and walked away. And from the glass behind her, two dragons stood watching, guarding a man who had never drawn a sword, never fired a cannon, never claimed a throne, only offered his hands and asked, "Are you hurting?" The palace awoke to no sirens, no alarms, no war horns, just wind, cold and quiet, howling through the carved stone towers of the Zarvathi capital as dawn broke over the throne world. And something else, absence. Queen Sarava was gone. Her royal chamber stood empty. Her crown, a curved obsidian diadem wrapped in coils of platinum flame, sat untouched on the armrest of her empty throne. No note, no farewell, just silence. As if the empire itself had exhaled and stepped away from its own reflection. The ministers panicked. The warlords locked down their ships. Civil governors began issuing declarations of emergency, and the galactic news cycles turned frenzied. Without her, the crown meant nothing. Without her command, who gave orders to the beasts? Ryan stood on the outer balcony with Drexar beside him, Solar curled at the base of the steps, staring out over a sky turning gold. He hadn't said a word all morning. He hadn't touched the crown. He had no interest in being king. Kais, the queen's former war priest and now self-appointed voice of the council, approached him at midday, flanked by silent guards who no longer marched in formation. "You could claim the seat," Kais said. "They would follow you now, not just the dragons, the people, the captains, even the silent sectors. You've replaced her." Ryan glanced at the throne behind him and chuckled softly. "I'm not here to rule. I'm here to fix what you all broke." Kais stiffened. "Then what would you have us do?" "Start listening," Ryan replied, "not to me, to them." He gestured toward the city where thousands of civilians, Sarvathi, human, alien alike, gathered in silence to watch the dragons perched beside him. No walls, no chains, no blood, just presence, just peace. "You built this world on fear," Ryan said. "Now try building it on truth." Kais bowed his head, not because he had been commanded, but because he believed. And that was the moment the empire cracked, not from rebellion, but from revelation. Later that night, in a quiet hangar carved from the mountain wall behind the palace, Ryan packed his tools. No guards stopped him. No advisor questioned his decision. He had done what no warlord could, turn the teeth of a dragon into the voice of a people. Drexar stood beside the shuttle, wings folded, breathing slow. Solar sat a few paces behind, watching him as if still unsure where he truly belonged. Ryan turned and rested his hand on Drexar's chest. "You're not mine," he said softly, "and you never were. I just saw what everyone else ignored." Drexar bowed his head, not out of submission, but gratitude. Solar stepped closer, nudged Ryan's shoulder. "You too," Ryan murmured with a faint smile. "You learned what they tried to bury in your bones. You chose who you want to be. That's worth more than armor or algorithms." Ryan climbed into the shuttle's hatch, engine humming low. As the ramp began to rise, Drexar let out a quiet, rumbling breath. Not a roar, a blessing, and Ryan smiled. Out there somewhere, systems still burned. Galaxies still waged their cold wars. But here, on this former world of chains and shadows, a story had changed. The tale of a dragon who obeyed no queen. The legend of another who never had a name until a mechanic gave him one. And the truth of a man with oil-stained hands who never asked to lead but simply listened. They would speak his name in murals, but he would never ask them to remember him because he hadn't come to be known. He had come to understand. And for the first time in 1,000 cycles, the dragons watched a ship leave not with sorrow, but with hope.